Okay, today I am going to be talking about Rudolf Dreikurs. Who was Rudolf Dreikurs and what did he do? Rudolf Dreikurs was born in Vienna, Austria on February 8th, 1897, and he later died in Chicago, Illinois on May 25th, 1972. While he was in Austria, he studied psychiatry and ended up earning a medical degree from the University of Vienna. He ended up leaving Vienna in 1937 because he wanted to avoid Nazi persecution. When he came to the United States, he ended up being an educator of psychiatry and actually ended up being a student and colleague of Alfred Adler, the famous psychologist. Some of his accomplishments, as stated earlier, is that he was a student and, worked alongside Alfred Adler and really studied and developed the theory of individual psychology. Adler really believed that the main purpose of being a human was to be accepted and to feel like you belong to something. So this individual psychology theory really, built on this, and Adler really stated that the reason that people, display this misbehavior is because of a sense of inferiority. Basically, children are born with this sense of inferiority when they are babies, and this can be seen as them having all of their needs being met by their parents. So when they're hungry, they will cry and their parents will feed them. When they want attention, they'll cry and their parents will hold them. Basically, children are really inferior, and as they grow and develop throughout their life, they will work towards this superiority. So Adler really believed this driving force of humans is to be superior, and basically behavior, emotions, thoughts, any type of misbehavior or behavior that we wouldn't expect or wouldn't really desire to see, this is all because of that force that's kind of driving us to be superior. Dreikurs kind of developed this theory and kind of simplified it so that parents and educators could apply it. And he really wanted to emphasize that punishments and rewards aren't really the way to go. And I'll definitely touch upon this later. When Dreikurs was working with Adler, he developed clinics related to child guidance, alcoholism, psychopathy, as well as just working in the mental hygiene field and with welfare. He actually organized the first mental hygiene committee in Austria. Even when Adler passed away in 1937, Dreikurs continued to spread the ideas and the theories of Adler as well as build upon them even after he passed away. While in 1937, when Adler passed away, Dreikurs and Adler were actually in the process of going around the country and giving lectures to people. Dreikurs finished this even after Adler passed, and he actually began his own journey to promote individual psychology through these lectures in prisons, schools, and healthcare settings. Individual theory. So this will be a little bit of a summary of what I just said. Basically, individuals are born inferior and they really strive for this superiority. So this can be seen in all of their behaviors, thoughts, and their emotions. Basically, babies are inferior, like I said. They're dependent on adult figures to care for their needs. So whenever they're hungry or whenever they need their diaper changed or when they need attention, this has to be done by an adult. No infant is getting up and getting themselves a bottle. They need someone else to do this. And so as we go throughout life, our behaviors and our thoughts and our emotions are a result of our need for superiority. And depending on these early childhood experiences, a child might have more of a less, need for superiority. If their needs really weren't met in childhood, or they might have been neglected, or they might not have had a strong bond with their caregiver, this will definitely affect their need for superiority. encouragement really matters. If we feel encouraged, we are going to demonstrate this desirable behavior that people kind of expect to see. But if we don't have that encouragement, then we are going to display this misbehavior. So that might be competing or withdrawing or giving up, or things that we don't expect or we don't want people to really display. Individual theory really focuses on helping children feel valued and significant and competent, and making them feel like they belong and that they're welcome in the classroom. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. Again, a person's personality, so whether or not they are really, really motivated towards superiority or just minorly motivated towards that superiority, is very dependent on a child's environment as well as the people that are around them. Again, those early childhood experiences are very important, as well as how individuals in their environment are addressing their behavior. Are they just giving them punishments, detention, timeout, or are they really approaching it in a way that's addressing those needs that aren't being met? Rudolf Dreikurs, a famous quote by him, is that a misbehaving child is a discouraged child. Again, this goes back to that encouragement. If a child doesn't feel like they're being encouraged, then, or if they aren't having their needs being met, they're going to display these misbehaviors. The development of individual theory and social discipline model. So as stated earlier, Rudolf Dreikurs studied with Alfred Adler, and they really focused on this individual theory. After Adler passed away, Dreikurs really took this individual theory, kind of made it more practical, and developed this social discipline model. The social discipline model is basically just a method for addressing behavior issues that really takes a strong stance on social psychology, because it recognizes that children are impacted by what other people think and what other people are doing. And this isn't just children, this is adults in general, but since we're talking about children, they are very affected by their teachers and their peers and their parents and the people around them. And there's this underlying need that everybody wants to fit in. Everybody wants to feel like they belong or that they are welcome. And the social discipline model really blames any kind of inappropriate or misbehavior on the child's inability to fit in or to feel like they belong or to be welcomed by the group. And so punishment isn't really effective in this aspect, because punishment is addressing the behavior, but it's not addressing any of the underlying causes of that behavior. So, for example, if a child is writing on the walls with permanent marker, a teacher might, give them a timeout or, talk to their parents, whereas you're punishing the behavior, but you're not really addressing the underlying need. And so kind of to go off of this, Dreikurs really classified misbehavior into these 4 domains: attention seeking, power and control, revenge, and helplessness and inadequacy. And he really believed that if you understand the goal of the behavior, the underlying cause of the behavior, then you would be able to address it in an appropriate way that fit or kind of address those child's needs. As stated earlier, Dreikurs really didn't believe in any kind of rewards or punishments to stop or continue behavior. He really thought that, the use of natural and logical consequences and encouragement were the perfect mixture to have this effective discipline. He really kind of steered away from those rewards and punishments, and really thought that consequences as well as encouragement, not praise, would really address misbehavior in the most effective way. Again, all behavior has a purpose. This goes back to the underlying causes of behavior. Kids don't just misbehave to misbehave. They don't just act out for the fun of it. There's some need that's some underlying need that is not being met, and this is the cause of the misbehavior. And this is really what Rudolf Dreikurs believed in. natural consequences versus logical consequences. So a natural consequence, this is something that occurs without anyone doing anything. It's inevitable. It's going to happen without anyone doing anything. There's no enforcement. An example is student forgets to wear their coat when it's cold outside. I'm sure many of you guys can guess. The student is going to get cold. So this is a natural result of not wearing the coat. So the consequence, the natural consequence, is that the student is going to get cold because they forgot their coat. This is something that occurs without anyone doing anything. On the flip side, we've got logical consequences. This is very similar to natural consequences, but it involves parents, teachers, any type of authority figure actually taking action. An example is a child comes home late past their curfew. A logical consequence will be that the parent makes the child's curfew earlier than it was before. The child's curfew is 10 o'clock, the parent might say, well, you didn't make your curfew, so now we're going to make it 6 o'clock. So that's a logical consequence of that misbehavior. They weren't able to follow the rules or the expectations, so as a result, there's a logical consequence that happens. Praise versus encouragement. Again, these are two terms that are used pretty interchangeably, but they're not actually the same thing. Praise is what happens when you give a child a reward after they've completed some task or they've achieved some type of requirement. So for example, if a child gets all of the problems right on their math quiz, you might say, wow, great job. That's something that they did after they completed a task. This is telling the students that they have satisfied the demands of others. Again, each task has a certain set of requirements, and once you meet those requirements, then you can get praise. In situations involving praise, the person that is giving the praise is often seen as superior, kind of indirectly looking down on another person. I know when you think about giving praise, a lot of you are probably like, what? Like, I didn't know I was, acting this way, but in general, when you give praise to another person, it's almost like you're the superior expert and they are the inferior that is receiving that praise. So although it might not be intentional, there is a difference in kind of like roles in a praise situation. Just move that. Praise also encourages competition. Again, you're asking students to fulfill a certain requirement or to complete a certain task. This is going to lead to some competition because they're working on the same task as their peers and they want to be the best at it. Some examples of praise are, you got an A, I'm so proud of you. Great job getting that home run. Let's go out for ice cream now. I like your picture. You did an awesome job. One thing I would like to note is that praise doesn't always involve a tangible reward. So in a lot of situations, people give praise and there isn't a tangible reward. They might say, wow, I'm so proud of you. In this situation, the reward is actually that verbal praise. Whereas in other situations, you might have that verbal praise along with an actual tangible thing that they can have. So ice cream, a sticker, a trophy, things like that. Next, we've got encouragement. Encouragement really acknowledges the effort of the student. And it's not really comparing to other students, and it's not really focusing on the student completing the task. It's focusing on the effort that they actually put into it. And this really helps students reflect on their own performance and how they're doing without actually acknowledging what other people are doing. You're not comparing them to other people. You're really focusing on the effort that they're putting into whatever they're completing. And this is a message between two equals. So as stated in praise, there's a superior and an inferior. With encouragement, you're both on the same level. You're both working towards the same goal. And you have these equal roles. There's not someone that's better or someone that's worse or someone superior, inferior. You're both on the same level and kind of working towards acknowledging that effort. Encouragement also encourages cooperation or kind of uses cooperation in this. Again, you're just really focusing on one person's performance and what you can kind of do to kind of improve that, rather than just focusing on completing a task. Some examples of encouragement are, you washed your hands without being told to, or, wow, you listened very carefully when I was reading out loud, used a lot of colors in your picture, you worked hard to clean up your mess. One thing you might notice about encouragement and praise is that encouragement is very specific, whereas praise is very vague. Again, you might give someone praise by saying, wow, great job. You know, what was a great job? What are you referring to? Whereas encouragement is very specific. You know, great job. I see that you use a lot of colors in your picture. Again, you know, we really focus on encouragement, but there is a time and place for both praise and encouragement, and I think that they can be used in conjunction with one another in a real situation. I think we use it very naturally, and sometimes we don't even realize that we use both of them a lot and in conjunction with each other. So there is a time and place for both of them, but again, they can be used in conjunction as well. Here is an example of different praise statements and how you can turn them into encouraging statements. So one example is, you're a good helper. So that's kind of a praise statement, and to kind of change that into an encouraging statement, you can say, you straightened all of the bookshelves. Again, you're really being specific in what you're providing that, you know, that encouragement for, you're providing that recognition for, and you're really focusing on the effort. Classroom implications. How can we apply this to the classroom? So, like I was just saying, you should really be providing encouragement, not praise. Again, there is a time and place for both of them, and they can be used in conjunction with one another. But I think the main takeaway is that you should be recognizing individual effort for a specific task and not making sure it's, you know, making sure that it is not vague and it's very specific. And the underlying reasoning behind this is that if you're providing this constant encouragement to individuals and, you know, focusing on motivating them to improve their performance and focus on themselves rather than competing with one another, this is going to make them believe that they're capable of doing things that they once thought were impossible. And it's really focusing on improving that self-esteem, that competence, and working towards that superiority. Again, you want to consider the goal of the misbehavior. This relates directly to like a doctor example that was mentioned in the book. If two people come in with a headache to the ER and one person is dehydrated and another person has a brain tumor, you're not going to treat them in the same way. And you should treat behavior as the exact same thing. When two students are displaying the same behavior, they might have different goals or different causes of that behavior. One student might be doing it because of attention, whereas another student might be doing the misbehavior because they feel inadequate. Again, your approaches to this misbehavior are going to be different because there's different causes to it. So the first step is you really should be, you know, evaluating the goal of the misbehavior and then taking that appropriate action. And I'm actually wearing my behavior shirt. It's all fun and games until you figure out the function of somebody's behavior. Again, this is pretty true because once you figure out the function, you can actually take that appropriate action to address that misbehavior, not just kind of going in the dark and doing a trial and error. You'll actually know what the student's trying to get out of it or what need is not being met. Teachers should have a democratic teaching style and classroom. So this just means that children are involved in creating rules, expectations, and really being involved in the learning process. Again, this is going to help students feel like they belong to something, that they're a part of something, and they're really going to have this social interest, this sense of purpose that they're contributing to something that's kind of bigger than themselves. And this is going to lead to higher self-esteem, you know, feeling of competence, and working towards that superiority. So they're not just, inferior and the teacher is giving all of this information to them, they're actually participating in it. So this, this is very important to have in your classroom, just to kind of help students improve on their self-esteem and really focus on, contributing to something that's bigger to themselves and feeling a sense of belonging. You should really foster these feelings of community and self-connectedness. Again, everyone wants to feel like they belong to something and they want to feel accepted by people. So you really need to work on helping students, feel welcome and feel valued and significant in the classroom. And you can do this by, working on relationships in the classroom, not just teacher to student, but also student to student. And you can encourage individual expression as well as cultural diversity, really making sure that students don't feel isolated from one another and really, feel a part of something bigger than themselves. Last but not least, you should really focus on mental health. When students feel inadequate or they feel like they don't belong and that human connectedness is really lacking, this is when this feelings of inferiority are going to be expressed. And as I stated earlier, when this inferiority is kind of overtaking a child's demeanor, this is when the misbehavior will start, because their needs aren't being met and they're feeling inferior. And this is where they start acting out because they're trying to tell you something. I know it may seem annoying when a child is talking during class or writing on the walls, but we really have to reframe our mindset to not immediately reacting to it and saying like, why are you doing this? Or, what is your problem? We don't want to say that. We want to take a step back. We have to acknowledge that there's some need that's not being met there, and we really have to act on that. And this really, goes back to that social emotional learning and really encouraging students to express when, they need something or that they need to express their emotions. And really, we need to improve self-esteem and this, work on these social interactions and really driving home the sense of belonging so students don't feel the need to misbehave because their needs aren't being met. If we teach them aspects of social emotional learning, they're going to have these coping strategies and these tools in their toolbox that they can use when their needs aren't being met. A quote that I really enjoy about basically this whole thing, social discipline model, individual theory, Rudolf Dreikurs, is one important tip to remember is that students choose their behavior and we have the power to influence, not control their choices. The change starts with the teacher. We need to learn how to interact with students so they'll want to choose appropriate behavior and comply with rules. Again, this ties back into the reading that we had just read this week, as well as all of the concept of the social discipline model. We can't change students' behavior. And a lot of research has really supported this. You can't make someone act in a certain way, but you can influence their choices. So although you can't change a person, you can really provide that encouragement and provide those consequences that will influence their decisions on how they're going to behave. And we really need to think about the approach that we have, because depending on how you approach this misbehavior, a child may be influenced one way or another on how, if or why they're going to change their behavior. Here are some of my references, and that's about it. Thanks for listening.